Hi.
Oh, get out of here.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. It is Thursday night. It is time for Revolutionary Change. I'm Jen Perelman.
I'm Peter Hager, and well, I guess we are just kind of descending straight to hell, Jen, aren't we?
Well, I mean, I've been looking forward to this my whole life. So, yeah,
You've been looking forward to what exactly?
the revolution.
Well, I think we're a lot closer to it today than we were yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
So, goes without saying that, of course, we're going to cover what happened in Minneapolis. We were debating about why or not even really debating, just kind of discussing why is it that Minneapolis is kind of the sort of the battlefield, if you will, for a lot of things that go on in this country. And, one really has to wonder what it is exactly about them that makes it such fertile ground for revolutionary activity. Any thoughts as to why that is the case?
Well, Minnesota has always been a fairly independent state. So it's one of those places that politically it's been sort of a back and forth thing. I mean, right now, definitely you can tell Trump has an attitude about Walt, and, Minneapolis is definitely a blue city and there's a lot of immigrants there. So it seems like an easy place to sort of kick down. I mean, I noticed that these ICE raids are not happening in red places. Like where I am right now, that's not happening here.
No,
So it's happening in blue places. And I think a lot of it has to do with basically political retribution from Donald Trump to his perceived rivals. And that has a lot to do with the location of where a lot of these things are happening.
I was curious because my understanding is that ICE agents are not supposed to be walking around in police regalia. Is that true?
I do not know all the rules that they're living by. I do not know all the quote unquote rules because, as far as I'm concerned, their entire existence is unconstitutional. That's, a subject for another time. But so it's like, asking me what the rules are for something that is generally what I consider to be unconstitutional and run in a complete lawless manner. So it really wouldn't matter what the rules are, considering that their existence is not even with that. That would be my thought.
There's many directions that we could go with this, but I think it's pretty clear that what you really need to see. And ironically, I grabbed this clip from a channel, a account that is trying to prove that this woman was trying to run over an ICE agent. Well, this is in slow motion, so you be the judge as to what really happened here. All right. Now, if you ask me, that does not appear to be a situation where the lady was trying to run over the agent.
No. My concern, and I have many, but my main concern is that, along with everything else, is that they're allowed to do whatever they want. Like, we're going to sit here and spend the next couple of days going back and forth about what we just saw and what's right and what's not. But again, as far as I'm concerned, this entire agency is rogue and lawless. So we're going to be sitting there and nitpicking about this, but at the end of the day, it's going to go away. Nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen to these people. There's not going to be any real accountability.
So in the court filings, the name was released. His name is Jonathan Ross.
Oh, they released the name of the officer guy, or the fake officer?
So what I found interesting was, again, these are saps. These are, toadies, goose steppers, whatever you want to call them, all for pay. Okay, gay for play, whore for play, whatever you want to call it. People will have their hands out, and in a broken economic and political system that we're living in right now, it does not surprise me in the least that there are people who are willing to do this for the shekels at all. We saw it. We see it in Israel. We see it with Ukraine. We will see it here. And everything is coming home to roost because, unbeknownst to most people, did you know that the ICE agents are trained by the IOF?
Yes. A lot of the police in our country, a lot of the municipalities, a lot of different state agencies are trained by the IOF. That's been a thing for a while.
Yep. ICE is IDF. It's come home to roost because all of you fuckheads out there kept your mouth shut for so goddamn long who didn't have the guts to say anything. And now you're all chomping at the bit to say, oh my God, this is terrible. Yeah, it's terrible for a reason. You don't want to actually deal with the core problem here. Everyone gets their panties in a bunch. And, you know, the funny thing about this that I think is very telling, so as you see how this ultimately unfolded here, it would be one thing if you supported ICE and said what needed to be said, which is, I believe that we need to protect the American citizenry. I believe that illegal immigration is a problem in this country, but the actions of ICE, particularly in this situation and a handful of others, is completely reprehensible and unacceptable. And instead of even giving a slight consideration to justice and humanity, they give none. And so what did they do in response? Well, we've seen plenty of them, but this one is probably the one that takes the cake the most in terms of high-ranking officials within the Trump administration.
Wait. We have to, I mean, if you're about to show what I think, we have to behold.
Okay, fine.
It's time to behold the Cuntosaurus. Cuntosaurus Rex. Okay, and everybody knows Cuntosaurus has a new hat. Yep.
As Violin says, 37-year-old mom of 3 kids, but her killer is somehow the true victim here. Well, hey, you know, if you're in the business of political propaganda, that's what you do. And here's what DHS Secretary and dog killer Kristi Noem had to say.
Just had in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It was an act of domestic terrorism. What happened, it was our ICE officers were out in an enforcement action. They got stuck in the snow because of the adverse weather that is in Minneapolis. They were attempting to push out their vehicle, and a woman attacked them and those surrounding them and attempted to run them over and ran.
I didn't see snow. I didn't see anybody stuck. I don't understand what in the world she's talking about. Nothing that she has said, it was depicted in the actual video from the scene.
I also can't understand why she's wearing her cowgirl hat like that. Seems like she's cosplaying. Excuse me while I put this cap down under my eyes so I can't see anything. I mean, this is...
Maybe it makes it easier for her to lie when people can't see her face. I don't know. But what she just said is not what we just saw, right? Like we saw what happened. There's people that were there that recorded what happened. So you can't lie about it. But yet here she is.
Them with her vehicle. An officer of ours acted quickly and defensively shot to protect himself and the people around him. And my understanding is that she was hit and is deceased. We're continuing to gather more information, but this goes to show the assaults that our ICE officers and our law enforcement are under every single day. These vehicle rammings are domestic acts of terrorism. We're working with the Department of Justice to prosecute them as such. We will continue to protect our ICE officers.
Of course you will, because this is all politics. This isn't about justice. Would you back the banning of DHS and ICE?
He knows I would, so that's why he's asking you. He knows I do.
Well, again, if we had real law enforcement in the United States, we wouldn't have any need for ICE. So
we don't need ICE. We lived without them for many, many years. Yeah. We did just fine. So, but then again, I'm for banning all of them.
I just don't understand how people get their rocks off constantly slurping at the nutsack of law enforcement. Like, I really don't understand that. It's absolutely perplexing, to say the least. We have to back the blue. We have to defend. We have to.
No, we most certainly don't. And here's the thing, as to whether or not ICE is or is not quote unquote law enforcement, I'll take it another level. None of what we have that's called law enforcement is actually law enforcement in this country. None of it. None of it. And to that extent, I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to do a little promotion of my event. Guys, we are going to be doing a 2-day event at the end of the month called Mission Abolition. We will be screening a movie Friday, January 30th, called Reimagining Safety. And then the next day, we will have 3 one-hour-long panel discussions in different areas discussing abolition. And I am not the moderator. I actually have really great people lined up to do this. So anyhow, so yeah. The quote unquote ICE law enforcement, it's just irrelevant whether or not they are or not.
Yeah,
Okay,
the Department of Homeland Security is something that was implemented after 9/11, much like the Patriot Act. And now that we know what we know about 9/11, it's like everything is a false flag. Any monumental moment that we go through is always done for a reason. Now, the reason why I don't think what happened last night was intentional is because it was captured on amateur video.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, and yes, that screening will be on this. We will be screening it on our channel Friday night, January 30th.
Are you just like completely disregarding what I said?
No, we're talking about what we were just watching in the video, but I think it's an important connection to what I'm talking about, and I want people to understand.
I think that's fine. I just, at this point, I think people need to understand that I am not somebody who supports, let's just abolish police and abolish our military. You can think whatever you want, but I don't support that. I support a just system. We do not have a just system, not even close. What we have is a runaway authoritarian bordering on totalitarian system. And the only reason it's not totalitarian is because more than half this country is armed, and that's pretty much it. So when you constantly see the push for, oh, we got to take the guns away, well, there's a reason, because they want the powers that be to have all the guns. And in a lawless system, we're kind of reverting back to the days of militia movements, because where else are you going to have it? There is no rule of law. There is nothing to believe in. This guy is going to walk away scot-free, and he committed murder. He committed murder with malice. He aimed for the face, and he shot.
Was pissed that she wasn't listening to him.
Yeah, and he shot her multiple times in the face, and it was a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Let me assure you, there are a lot of men out there who give off small dick energy in a very big way. And that's what Jonathan Ross did. He's a stocky, maybe he was law enforcement at one time, got excited about becoming a member of ICE. Maybe he's a person who doesn't like people of color. Who knows?
This was a white woman.
Whatever his reasoning was, he decided that he wanted to play commando. And it's very possible that when they go through this training, especially if it's with the IDF, they're basically told, oh, you're untouchable. You can do whatever you want, and we will keep doing it. How do I know that they'll keep doing it? Leave it to the worst elected official when it comes to the pro-Israel narrative to push the pro-kill civilians narrative through ICE.
To say enough. And if you get in the way of the government repelling a foreign invasion, you're going to end up just like that lady did yesterday.
All right, Florida Congressman Randy Fine, great to see you this morning. I wish it was
great to see you this morning. First of all, can I just say that when I see him up against that wall like that with his hair and his facial hair growing in the way that it is, I swear to God, I thought he was auditioning to become a rabbi. I wasn't sure where he was going, but if you had just put the hat on, if you just put on the hat, I swear to God, you would think, you want to talk about a foreign invasion, Zionist scumbags like this mother effer on the screen, that is who's invading this country and needs to be removed. And that is where our immigration process has failed. We don't want people like him in this country. And unfortunately, to get him out, it's going to require multiple seats. Yeah. Again, this is what happens. There is no justification behind any of this. And the reason they're shooting at him now is because they want people scared. They understand that they're losing control. And when you lose control, what do you have to do? You have to make an example. And by making an example, they're now taking shots at people in Portland, maybe Seattle will be next. Maybe it's Oakland. Maybe it's LA.
They're
Again,
going to go to they're going to go to
blue
the blue
cities and blue
places.
states.
They're
Blue
going to go to the blue places that have the most restrictive gun laws. And that's going to be where they're going to do these shenanigans. The states that have better gun laws for them, because they don't have to worry about most people walking around carrying. Like, let them try this. Let them try this shit in somewhere in Texas.
And as Sean Rockers points out, her tires are clearly directed to the right, which means that she was attempting to avoid him. She was looking to get away. So when this, but again, it's a lawless society now.
Yes.
So the FBI is apparently not cooperating with the local Minnesota police investigation.
Shocking.
Yeah.
They seem like they really are just so transparent and forthcoming. I really was thinking the FBI with Kash Patel, especially, they were striking me as just really very concerned with civil liberties and protecting justice.
Well, would you have expected anything less?
No, that's exactly what I expect. And are we done with this, or do I have to stare at Newsmax Barbie for longer?
Oof. Well, I'm going to give you a Barbie, all right. So I'm sure you all have observed all of the so-called MAGA influencers that got their marching orders. They went right along with the talking points. They're all saying the same thing. You know, much like the shit libs all said the same thing about Venezuela. Oh, it's a wonderful day for the Venezuelans, but we don't like the way Trump went about doing it. And lengthy explanations too. Cory Booker, Wasserman Schultz, and on and on and on. Conservative Inc. got their marching orders from whomever delivered them, and they're all saying the same thing. She's he's the victim. She's the perpetrator.
Right. She was attempting to run him over. Nobody buys that, though. We can all see what happened. Just like we can all see that there's a Holocaust happening, no matter what you say to the contrary. They could keep saying what they want to say. And unfortunately, we won't see justice in a lot of these cases because what they say, unfortunately, is the official story. But we all know the truth.
You know, there was a tweet that Laura Loomer put out. I don't have to pull it up, but she basically said the woman got what she deserved. And the fact that she is a she, her pronouns, that all the more reason why she deserved it. Let me explain one thing about Laura Loomer that I can just say on good authority as somebody who has been in the dating world, somebody who has met plenty of women that are like her. She's a very miserable, unhappy person who hates herself. And she projects onto the world.
Oh, look at her. It's hard not to hate her.
No, for her not to hate herself.
Well, she's a horrible person. So, of course she hates herself. She's a horrible person.
She's also somebody who I do believe is mentally ill. So when you have somebody who's mentally ill, I didn't see that Demi Moore movie where basically she's obsessed with her looks and it's, like the constant cutting and things like that. She gives off that vibe 1,000%.
Well, keep cutting away, lady. Maybe you'll eventually hit that carotid.
Well, that's probably what's going to end up happening in her case. But again, she's paid to say that. Now, I could have gone in a lot of different directions in terms of who I thought was the most egregious in terms of their commentary, in terms of who just embodies the overarching problem here when it comes to just going along with whatever the corporate narrative is for your particular political faction, who says, here's the talking points. This is what we're sticking with. Protect ICE at all costs. Protect Jonathan Ross. Make Renee Good into the enemy. Make her into the perpetrator. And make Jonathan Ross into the victim. That's our job. But sir, it looks really. It doesn't matter. Just do it. This is how politics works. We are not allowed to give any ground, especially on issues that are the most controversial, that divide and conquer the most people. So of all the, we'll say, I hesitate to use the word influencer because I wouldn't call a person like this an influencer. I would just call them a yes person, a goose stepper. They do what they do for a paycheck, and they'll throw as many people under the bus as they need to. So I've never played a clip from Morgan Ariel before, but I'm familiar with her. I know who she is. But this is an example of, as Jen likes to put it, caucasity. It's also an example of somebody who clearly never got their ass kicked properly. And it's also an example of, I guess, what you would call the privileged white woman in the suburbs that would give up liberty for security. And that's the danger that we're living with today, is anyone who is living in the capital, as you like to say, is going to give up liberty at the expense of everyone else in order for their own security. And this is what she had to say about the incident.
I just can't even fathom the level of retardedness that I've seen coming from the right in attacking the ICE agents for doing their jobs. If an individual tries to run you over with their vehicle, that's attempted murder.
Okay, let's play this one more time because I don't like the way that the quality of this video has come out. Maybe it'll right itself, but listen to what she says again. She's not going after the left. She's going after the right. She's going after the right.
I just can't even fathom the level of retardedness that I've seen coming from the right in attacking the ICE agents for doing their jobs. If an individual tries to run you over with their vehicle, that's attempted murder.
Like, that's totally attempted murder, Jen.
That's what she sounds ridiculous. She sounds like a just valley girl.
Totally. Like, did you not see?
Yeah. Are we sure that this isn't AI? Because
no, I thought that she was AI too, but she's not apparently.
Okay.
Hey, if it pays well, right? That is the thing. What we need is another bimbo airhead who doesn't know what. Well, unfortunately, my friend, there's a lot of simps out there that like these trad women, I guess, or that's what they're portraying themselves to be. That's, like I said, that's the thing about social media. That's the thing about terminal online individuals. Fantasy is better than reality.
Okay, people are wanting to know again, who is this and why?
Her name is Morgan Ariel. She is a MAGA influencer, apparently.
Okay, so we're giving her airspace. Continue.
They have every right to act quickly and with force, deadly force, which is what happened there. Common sense tells any single person that if an officer tells you to do something, you do what they say so that you don't lose your life. You don't proceed to try to run them over. You don't resist arrest. You don't do the opposite of what they tell you to do. You comply with what they're asking you to do. And leave it to a middle-aged white woman to be Captain Save-A-Ho, and now you lost your life. You should be at home raising your children, staying off the streets, instead of fighting ICE agents and advocating for your own extinction in the country that we created. And also,
who's we, bitch? What is this we shit? What have you created? Yeah, I don't know that I can watch much more of this. Like, this is really gross to me. Can we not watch this? This is bad.
There is a little bit more, but I think it's important for people to understand that these are paid influencers out there. They are not very sharp. And that is the nicest of way of me saying that when a woman like her uses the word retarded, she's clearly not looking in the mirror very often. She can barely put two words together, much less two sentences. Is there a reason you're doing this? You know, it's actually pretty rude. I'm actually trying to do something here and make a point, and all you're doing is just trying to make it seem like who gives a shit what Pete has to say.
No, we just don't like her. That's all we're saying.
Yeah, no shit. I don't like her either. And I'm trying to make a point. It's not polite. Like, it's just not.
let me run the video back for the people that are still saying, oh, well, she didn't hit him. Yes, she did hit him.
No, she didn't. And what she's trying to claim is that the person who hit her or hit the car is the person who didn't shoot her.
So I'm going to need you all to wake up, snap out of it, and stop acting like liberals right now. And if you are illegal and you happen to see this video, the message is clear. It's time for you to get out of our country.
No, it's time for you to get fucked. And you can take that however which way you want. But I am so tired of seeing women like this who think they're hotter than they really are. You're not that attractive, lady. You're certainly not attractive to be getting paid top dollar to spew the bullshit that you spew. And I often wonder, how is it that they get to the point of entitlement where it's clear that they've never been given the proper treatment that they deserve? How do they get to this point where they don't get their face smashed in? That's what I don't understand.
Are you asking me? Are you asking me?
Are we not doing a show together?
Well, I wasn't sure if you were done or what you were asking me. Well, I think the reason people like that get away with it is, and again, I didn't know who this was until now, is because people give her a platform that she doesn't deserve, which is why I don't like doing it. Because it just gives her more platform and more space. And now more people have now been subjected to her. So that's why she gets to be like that, because people are willing to play it, I guess. I guess there's someone's giving her a 7.
Well, again, I'm playing it for a reason. I'm not playing it specifically because of her. I'm playing it because this has been the narrative that's been going around for the past 24 hours. They're all sounding like this. Now, she's particularly egregious. But I thought that it's necessary for people to see that if you want to know why the consensus isn't, this was a tragedy and it shouldn't have happened, it's because they're paying these people. They're paying them an ungodly amount of money to go in front of a camera and say that he was the victim. You forced him to shoot you dead because you were such a threat. And now you're going to see more shootings that are going to pop up because that's the reason why they're able to get away with this. They want to bring you to heel, just as Hillary Clinton said. That's the intention. And those that are willing to go along to get along, no matter how bad it looks, you'll be taken care of. You'll be protected until maybe you're not protected. Either you speak truth to power or you don't. What is the point of living on your knees when you can die on your feet? I won't live on my knees. That's why I feel it's imperative that we talk about this. So while you may not like it, and some people in the audience may not like it, I think it's important. Just like there are things that you want to talk about that maybe I'm not 100% on board with, but I'm not going to question it because we're a team. And in this case, this person embodies everything that's wrong with why being a paid influencer takes every ounce of integrity out of your soul, removes it completely, and you will never get it back. As far as I'm concerned, it's like everybody else. You either have a soul or you don't. You can't bring it back once you've decided to cross that Rubicon. I will be paid, and I will be a proxy for mass murder. I will be a proxy for child rape. I will be a proxy for ICE. It's all connected. There is no separation, none. And that's a prime example of how somebody is willing to sacrifice everything that this country is supposed to stand for in terms of justice, in terms of truth. It's all gone, all of it. And they're nasty and gleeful while they talk about it. They're so content with being pieces of shit.
Why would they be any different than the people that are supposedly our representatives? When you have someone like Randy Swine, who's perfectly content to watch babies get killed, why would we expect their paid influencers to be any different than the other people? Like they don't care. They don't care.
No, they don't care. And unfortunately, this woman, Renee, Good, I believe is her name. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And
no, she wasn't in the wrong place at the wrong time. 1,000% no. She was in the exact right place. She was sticking up for her neighbors and monitoring and speaking out against her neighborhood being violated by stormtroopers. And then when she was driving out of the way, which she stopped and let a few of them go, because there's a part of the video before that where that picks up. And then they murdered her because she didn't stop and listen to them, because he wanted her to stop.
You know,
So
I've
that
read,
means that because he wants her to stop, and according to that dumb bimbo that we just had to be subjected to, she thinks that it's perfectly legitimate. This is the ranting. And speaking of somebody who's talking about privileged white women, when that is what that woman is the epitome of, is a privileged white woman. You sit there and say that you have to do what they tell you to do, or it's too bad if you get shot in the face. Like, can we really wrap our head around that for a second? How insane that is, that somehow there's anything that that woman did that justified that.
which is why, like I said, there is no line that they will not cross for a paycheck. That's the point. There is no line that people will not cross for a paycheck.
Not all of it is for a paycheck. Some of these people actually believe this shit. A lot of these people they believe their team. They support their team. And they would be supporting their team even if they weren't getting paid. Now, there are people that are pay for play. But a lot of these people, that's their team. Just like you've got the blue idiots.
Yeah, well, again, this is the problem here, Cy. You have to understand that these ICE agents are going into these neighborhoods and they're terrorizing people. This is not a case of, you know, think of it this way. If this was anything that was somewhat reasonable, and again, I use that term loosely. If this was a DUI checkpoint, and instead what you had is a checkpoint specifically to prove that you're a citizen. Standard procedure, you drive up. Hi, how are you doing this evening? I just need to see some identification. I honestly wouldn't have any problem with that. But we don't have that. That's not what we have. We have raids. We have assault weapons. We have violence perpetrated by commandos or wannabe commandos. These guys have never, in most cases, seen action, but they're being trained by the IDF. That's a fact. When you're told that you will not be prosecuted, that you will never get in trouble for anything that you've done, why would you not expect some psychopaths to eventually go along with it and just say, hey, they're going to get me out of it if I do anything wrong? Remember, you're the law. You're the last line of defense. And if anyone gets out of line, don't hesitate to use lethal force because we've got your back. What other situation could it possibly be? That's what they're being told. And they just go right along with it. It seems pretty clear cut, if you ask me.
Yeah, and I see people in the chat sort of hashing it out, but the bottom line is, for me personally, again, I find the entire agency to be an unlawfully existing agency and completely rogue and lawless. So to me, it's akin to following illegal orders if you're in the military, right? That's, as far as I'm concerned, that's a complete rogue, lawless group, and they are not justified. But even if I didn't think that, then you don't get to just shoot someone in the face for not listening to you. And the fact that that just seems normal to people and that anybody could justify that is just that it's a sign as to how far we have fallen, where people could think, well, if you were here legally and you weren't trying to run, and you could actually sit there and say things that would justify a person being shot in the face, not in self-defense. And you could twist that video any way you want. I don't care what anybody says. There's no way that you could tell me that was self-defense. That's just silly. That's silly.
That's what gets me upset. You fucked up, but you can't even admit that. No, she did it. It was her fault. It's like a Naked Gun sketch.
You're not allowed to do that just because, in fact, this is the problem in this country, and particularly with what you're saying, law enforcement, is the thing is law enforcement should be the last people to ever pull weapons. It
Correct.
should only be if it is a dire necessity and someone else has a weapon. Otherwise, you do your best to de-escalate and stay out of the way. And then this woman was in her own neighborhood, right? So you could know who she was. You have her license plate. You could go back. If you really wanted to go arrest this woman for impeding your situation, you could do that, Like, and it would probably be a misdemeanor and whatever, right? Like you could, but that wasn't what this was. He was just pissed because she didn't listen to him. So he felt entitled to shoot her in the face.
And I also want to point out that because our channel takes risks, and we, just so you know, have received our second copyright strike, this is what they do to our channel. And Warrior Flight is always here. Probably has clicked the bell, subscribed, comments all the time. And she didn't get a reminder that we went live tonight. You have to search for our channel. The great thing about our audience, who we love dearly, you guys actually want to be here and you probably look forward. You don't need a reminder to come find our channel. You know, when we go live, you know what we're going to talk about when you see the headline and more, and you know that that's what it's going to be about. But they shadow ban the fuck out of this channel every day. And now they're trying to shut us down. You know why? Because we talk about this. Well, if you thought that that story was juicy, this is even better. When we talk about people that are willing to do anything, and I mean anything for a paycheck, this is why we talk about the Zio state and how absolutely despicable these fucking people are. This guy's name, I believe, is Hank Finman. I want to get his name right. So this guy is a Zionist pastor, and Hank Kuhnman, a Christian Zionist pastor. Well, I'm not even going to explain what he did. I'm just going to show you what he said.
You have seized Venezuela for the oil. Yes.
Listen again.
They say you have seized Venezuela for the oil. Yes, this is true.
But I'm going to figure out a way to defend this. You seized it for the oil.
That there is that which has been brought to the forefront of this earthly battle. But the enemy has sought and was seeking to.
There is a channel called Pontificating with Pete. If you guys would be so kind as to go and subscribe there. This is how we avoid this problem if they shut us down. And just so you know, I'm not going to say who it was, but let's just say that the second copyright strike was from a year ago. And when we went to confront them about it, they said, pay us 500 euros and we'll take it down. So to say that we're being extorted would be an understatement. So make sure that you go and subscribe to Pontificating with Pete. And yes, Jen is allowed on Pontificating with Pete. Just all kidding aside, that's our backup channel if for whatever reason shit hits the fan, which we are anticipating that it will, because you're clearly seeing what they're willing to do.
To bring war and to bring conflict through Venezuela and to control the oil of the earth. But the spiritual oil and the natural oil does not belong to the forces of darkness or to those who thought.
Listen again.
And to bring conflict through Venezuela and to control the oil of the earth. But the spiritual oil and the natural oil does not belong to the forces of darkness.
So now Maduro is the forces of darkness. I had no idea. Did you know that Maduro was this evil spirit amongst us, Jen?
Well, apparently this guy got his same talking points in line. Somebody's paying this guy on the back end too.
Well, Travers has the comment of the night so far. Is this Mexican Frankenstein? Well, he's definitely stuffed tight. That's for sure.
Or to those who thought they could bring a one world order. This is my reset. And the oil of the natural and the oil of the spirit.
Colin, I need to know why our clips are not good tonight. Like, this is ridiculously bad.
He needs to know.
Hey, Chad, is it bad for you? It looks fine on my end, so I can't diagnose it. If Chad could let me know. Is it?
Jen says it's choppy on her end as well.
It's choppy.
Yeah, David.
You guys couldn't find it, so until it's this. It's pontificating with Pete, and it is a YouTube channel, and it's just been sitting dormant. We haven't really done anything with it. We've just been using this main channel, but in case we get shut down, it's a place for us to be putting our content. So right now there's really, I don't think there's much there, but just so that you know, if we get shut down, that's where we could go.
Jen, I think this would be an appropriate time to mention who is going to be our guest at the end of this month, who can speak very succinctly about the grift that is evangelism in terms of Christianity.
Yeah. So, I finished it actually. Guys, the book is called Separation of Church and Hate by John Fugelsang. And he has been a guest on our show before. It's been quite a while. And he has a lot to say as somebody who knows that his mother was a nun and his father was like a Franciscan brother. And they both ended up leaving their orders and getting together. And so he grew up in an extremely religious, knowledgeable household. And his book is really very, it's very good. It's a very good way to debate with the people that follow the likes of these people.
I want everyone here to know that I love Jen dearly. She means the world to me. Sometimes when we do these live streams, she likes to poke at me and I poke at her, but I get very passionate about this stuff and I'm not trying to give her the business. I'm just very agitated about the way things are. And I get very, very tired at seeing the injustice that is going on. And what's even worse is that I see people in my line of work. I see people. I told you, I'm in commercial real estate. I deal with some of the most greedy sons of bitches walking the earth. And I have seen people that I know pretty well celebrating what's going on in Venezuela. Why are they celebrating it? Because it's good for business. And they know it. They know that they're going to benefit from this. So naturally, they're going to say, fuck the Venezuelan people, fuck the American people. It's all about the oligarchs and who's going to make dividends and make money off of this. Like shitbags like this fuckhead on the screen. This guy's
he looks like Liberace Dracula.
Absolutely. And look, he's got a Christian rock band behind him. This is...
Finish this out so we could be done looking at this.
No, we're going to play it one more time. So apparently the connection should be better now. I hope, because I could tell it's choppy on my end. Colin, why did you pull that? Please put it back. Thank you. I see.
You have seized Venezuela for the oil. Yes, this is true that there is that which has been brought to the forefront of this earthly battle. But the enemy has sought and was seeking to bring war and to bring conflict through Venezuela and to control the oil of the earth. But the spiritual oil and the natural oil does not belong to the forces of darkness or to those who thought that they could bring a one world order. This is my reset. And the oil of the natural and the oil of the spirit is mine, says the Lord.
I'm still wondering when it's going to become a breaking point for even the most brain dead of churchgoers who never question what their pastors have to say, what their priests have to say, what the rabbis have to say. Is there anybody, and I mean anybody, who can listen to this and think, I feel like I'm probably better suited to just follow the teachings of Jesus and not have to come to church every Sunday?
And that's one of the key things we'll be talking about with our guest, John Fugelsang.
And this is, and I'm sure you would agree, one of the real tragedies here is that they take advantage of these people who are desperately seeking community and acceptance. They take
The reason I put that up was I wanted to address it before we moved on, okay? Because I think it's important we address the fact that we have a backup channel. So yes, that backup channel has not really been addressed in a while. So it still has the old color scheme with it. But yes, that's our backup channel. It is purple.
Now, I want to lighten the mood a little bit, because I want people to understand that this whole grifting class of evangelical pastors, this has been going on forever. This is not a new thing. You know, John Hagee, who we're going to get to later in the evening, it's a cottage industry. This is all about money. And I don't know how many of you, again, I'm a millennial, but I was very fond of In Living Color when I was growing up, and I only discovered it because of Jim Carrey in Ace Ventura, and then they started playing them over and over again. And so they knew how to satirize certain topics better than anybody. And this, to me, as you saw with Liberace Dracula, this is a perfect encapsulation, and this is almost 35 years ago that this clip was done. So nothing's changed. It's still the same.
Wait, are we going to get a copyright strike now?
See you Sunday, Reverend. Boy, I feel love. This evening. Remain standing and hold up your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
So help me, my God. Now let he who is without sin cast the first stone.
Hallelujah for those who wear fig leaves, should not dance with hungry goats.
Amen.
State your names for the records.
My name is the Reverend Ed Cash. Dollar bills, no food stamps, please.
And I'm the Reverend Dr. Carl Pathos, this ministry's spiritual gynecologist.
Now, would you please tell us the name of your church?
That would be the First Church of Discount Center. Yes, Lord, as of now, we have 6 locations throughout the greater metropolitan area.
The Lord is slashing prices and all sin must go. Just dial 1-800-SIN-A-LOT for the franchise nearest you.
I mean, you have to tell me where the lie is, because I don't see it. This is the same thing. How is it any different?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't watch In Living Color, but I do know that it was good.
Well, I hope Rachel's enjoying it.
She likes it.
We even have a drive-through window. Can I take your order, Reverend?
Yes, I'd like some forgiveness, please.
Would you like a hot apple pie with that?
Yes, and I'll have a Moses McMuffin, too.
Gentlemen, are you actually charging people a fee to forgive their sins?
We prefer to call it a donation.
Praise be, for he who giveth shall be without sin for 90 days or your money back.
I think somebody been sipping on the holy water.
Reverend Cash, it says here that you don't earn a dime. How do you explain your extravagant lifestyle?
Extravagant? You call this Rolex extravagant? This is the bottom of the line. No, you got it all wrong. See, what I do is operate a trust fund for the Lord. That's right, for the big guy. See, he's the one with all the money. That's right, he tell me what to do with it. If it was me, I'd invest. A couple junk bonds I got my eye on, but what can I tell the Lord? If the Lord want to buy a big hat with a feather in it, what am I supposed to say? No, Lord, you can't have it. The Lord seen chaff.
Stick it in and call it macaroni. That's what I'd say.
And if he want a house, 300 square feet, what am I going to say? No, Lord, you can't have it on your earth?
The Lord uses that jacuzzi in mysterious ways.
And it's time for the Lord to clean it out.
So hopefully we don't get a copyright strike. But
why do you think we would get a copyright strike?
Because we keep getting them. So now you're playing other material. When you play other people's material is when we can get a copyright.
It's not other people's material. Somebody again, if we're going to get bounced, we're going to get bounced. That's it.
Okay.
And again, are you really that upset that I played that clip?
I'm not upset that you played that clip. I'm concerned that we're getting strikes, and I don't want to give any opportunity for something to be that. That's all.
Yeah, that clip was from 35 years ago. And that clip is not from some In Living Color channel. It's not from a Fox channel. Somebody randomly posted it online. I found it, and I thought it was a perfect encapsulation from a satirical point of view to combat the bullshit that these evangelical pastors put out there, putting out there their support, nonetheless, for invading Venezuela because it's God's will to take their oil, because Maduro's evil. What about the Venezuelan people? What about them? Do they count? Is everything okay?
Yeah, everything's fine. Are you talking to me about were you? I'm just not sure if you're asking me or if you're just.
I'm trying to have a conversation with you, and it feels like you don't want to talk about it.
No, I'm willing to talk about it. Yeah, I mean, I think that we've talked about Venezuela, and I think that, yeah.
And leave it to the President of the United States to just be very forthcoming about why we're in Venezuela.
You referenced boots on the ground earlier. Can you just sort of button this up? Do you envision the U.S. military having a presence in Venezuela as the U.S. runs that country?
No, we're going to have a presence in Venezuela as it pertains to oil, because we're sending our expertise in. So you may need something, not very much. But no, we're going to be taking out a tremendous amount of wealth out of the ground. And that wealth is going to the people of Venezuela and people from outside of Venezuela that used to be in Venezuela. And it goes also to the United States of.
Just look at Rubio in the background with the huffing and puffing.
Because he doesn't like Trump at all. He's just such a little cuck that he's just going to do whatever he needs to do to wait out this administration and try to run for president. But he doesn't like Trump. He's never liked Trump. So, he's just that's another problem.
Well,
no, Trump is the king of the truth, man. Nobody lies as good as he does.
Yeah, Rubio was a never Trumper, and now he's a Trump bootlicker, just like Ben Shapiro. Unbelievable.
America in the form of reimbursement for the damages caused us by that country. So I want to thank you all very much. Thank you. Do you have one? Yes.
We would totally have to take them over because they caused a lot of profits to be lost, and that is really their fault. So we have to punish them for it. It's our money. It's our resources. We control it. That's the way it works. And that is how we make America great again.
Yeah, again. So the other problem, I think, is that, people really think that the only motivation is getting natural resources. And the bigger picture, again, as I keep saying, is China. And we do not like for China to engage in any sort of diplomacy or trade or exchange with nations in South America, because we just don't like that. And so that's a big part of this, is that we don't like that, because we somehow think that, according to the Donroe doctrine, like that we just own the whole hemisphere. And because we own the hemisphere, how dare China try to have any sort of, exchange with South America? How dare they do that?
I mean, how much control do we have all over the world with our military might?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the point. And so it is not a coincidence that what we did was like right after China's, I don't know who it was in their administration, but it wasn't Ping, but was just over there and meeting with Maduro and establishing, channels of communication. And so, of course, then we have to be like, no, we're not going to have that. So, no. This is where we are. Thank you. This is actually Rachel's keffiyeh, but I do also have a keffiyeh. It's KEFFIYAH.
If you're enjoying the conversation so far, which we certainly hope that you are, please consider going over to patreon.com/revolutionary change. For as little as $5 a month, you can become a supporter of our small but mighty but suppressed channel that we're desperately trying to grow. We're doing the best we can, but your support makes a tremendous difference. T. Suzuki, thank you for becoming a YouTube member. I don't agree with the hammer and sickle, but hey, we appreciate you being here either way. I believe in everyone's right as far as political expression goes. Just don't be a shill for corporate special interests. That's all I ask. That's all I ask. Ramsey Gouda, thank you for becoming a YouTube member. We really appreciate you being here, my friend. And Gouda is one of my favorites. Libertarian Social Democrat with the 199, abolish ICE, DHS, bring back INS under DOJ pre 9/11. Hey, what would be different if that were the case?
What do you mean? What would be different? Well, it was prior to having executive branch Gestapo. You know, you're talking about, well, ICE is completely unnecessary.
Yeah, it sure
And
seems.
it's all unnecessary, but yeah.
Jim Talib with the $5. Always a pleasure. Appreciate you chipping in, my friend. No Opinion with one of the best names out there. Thank you for the $5 super sticker. Teresa with the $2. Contempt of cop is not a crime. Are you sure about that? Apparently it is one now. David Hunter with the $10. This is a special day. Barbouche at Hopopola 1993. My very best friend from Prague, the Czech Republic, is here to be a part of the revolution. That is awesome. I hope they're in the chat this evening. I hope they're enjoying the channel. David, it's always a pleasure to have you here, my friend.
I love Prague. Prague is lovely.
Haven't been, but I'm sure it's great. I'll get to another country in Europe pretty soon. By the way, before we continue, I just want to say, being in Ireland on New Year's, you know what I noticed? There were several cops in the streets, not an army brigade, but, the cops were there. You know what else I noticed? They weren't flashing guns. In fact, I'd be surprised if they only had batons on them. So quite different and quite peaceful, I might add, over there compared to here. It's almost as if the more weaponry you have, the more people are going to be inclined to use it. That's just a thought. Teresa with the $20 super sticker.
Thank
Pleasure.
you, Teresa.
Always appreciate you being here, my friend. And the A channel with the $1.99. Thank you very, very much. So yeah, we have a wonderful audience that supports our channel, even though we have these uphill battles that we constantly have to fight. And that is the name of the game. And of course, we do have an esteemed guest that is joining us this evening. Omar, I believe you're here. I don't see your image or your audio, but want to make sure that you're ready to go. So Jen, if you would please do the honors.
Yes. So Omar Zahzah is a writer, poet, organizer of Lebanese Palestinian descent, and assistant professor of Arab and Muslim ethnicities and diaspora studies at San Francisco State University. And his book, Terms of Servitude, he uncovers big tech's role in silencing Palestinian voices and weaponizing technology in the service of Israel's settler colonial occupation of Palestine. So it's basically the concept of digital colonialism, which is really interesting.
So without further ado, Omar Zahzah, welcome to Revolutionary Change.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Hi, good to meet you all too.
So one of the things that I want people to understand, and we always repeat this almost like every time this concept comes up, is that these issues all have been going on long before October 7th. And in fact, one of the key things I noticed right away in your book is that it goes back, when it even started was, I believe, 21. Was that like when you were, okay, so I'm in the vicinity. So I was hoping what you would do is share, and also before we even get, there's two prongs that I'm seeing here, and tell me if I'm right. There's the tech part in terms of using that to get into and hurt Palestinians in Palestinian society, and then the fact of the tech being censored in terms of what we're hearing about here. So I'm feeling like that was the gist of it. But if you would just talk about why you did this, like what was the precursor to doing Terms of Servitude?
Yeah. Thanks for that question. So, you're absolutely right. This goes back a very long time. For me personally, what happened around 2021, when this project began, I was noticing that in many ways, Palestinian protests, particularly Palestinian protests that was using social media in very strategic ways, started to become a lot more viral than I think we had been previously accustomed to. And just to kind of take us back a little bit, right? This was following on the heels of 2020 when you have the George Floyd uprisings. And, similarly, massive protests and demonstrations and the savvy usage of social media started to cause for a broader receptivity to discussions and rethinking conversations about structural oppression, shifting it from questions of simply bigotry or bias to thinking about actually there are systemic injustices in place, right? And so what happens in 2021 is Palestinians in the occupied East Jerusalem neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah are protesting their looming expulsion from their homes. And, one of their tools is social media, right? And so they immediately start broadcasting their messages about their most recent protests. But what is kind of interesting is that in this moment, you really start to see these messages be received a lot more, right? And you start to see conversations about the nature of Palestinian oppression being kind of reconsidered, even in, what I like to refer to as the corporate media, in ways that we hadn't really seen before. So all of a sudden, you start to have this shift, as Palestinian activists are taking to these different platforms to talk about their struggles. There's also this broader receptivity to the question of Palestine as such, to where people are, suddenly primed to, at least in terms of conceptual discourse, right, or a conversation, to rethink what actually it is all about. And so I was kind of struck by how these new platforms were being used precisely in the ways that they're often sold to us as, right, where this is about, the Democratic Square. This is about bringing, all of those who've been cast to the fringes of society to the fore, empowering them to be able, all this stuff that we're sold often as like the propaganda for these platforms, right? But seeing Palestinians do it in this way was suddenly kind of, I think, bringing us to an interesting moment where we saw that happening and we saw it working. And just as it seems to work, at least in terms of the receptivity of the messages, we see the very companies that have provided these platforms begin to kind of try to pull the curtain back and start engaging in mass censorship, right? So at the tail end of 2021, 2022, you start to have this explosion of censorship of posts about Sheikh Jarrah, about, incursions into the Al-Aqsa Mosque, about, the then most recent bombing campaigns in the Gaza Strip. And it happens at such a scale that, legacy media has to report on it. And of course, the companies say, well, this is a glitch. We're, of course, not directly targeting posts about these topics or Palestinians as such. Of course, now, years into the latest genocide, this has, definitely become routine. And you've had several human rights organizations even issue reports about, how censorship at such a scale is a direct violation of Palestinian digital rights, right? But at that time, I felt like we were in a moment where we're seeing all these things play out in real time. And so I found myself intrigued by how, these tools that were in many ways, however inadvertently, on some level responsible for the broader narrative shifts we saw culturally, became the very same tools that were used to kind of, scale back this messaging. And, it sort of seemed to me that Palestinians were being directly targeted by these forms of censorship, right? And it's not the same thing as saying they're the only group of people that have ever been censored on social media. That's not what I'm saying. But the scale and the ways in which they are censored and the ways in which posts about Palestine en masse are often censored on these hegemonic platforms, I felt was something that needed to be commented upon, precisely because it is an example of an entire collective group of people engaged in the liberation struggle being targeted in real time, right? And again, by these very platforms that often branded themselves as being the kind of saviors of democracy, right? And just very quickly to get to the other aspect of the question, right? It is also about technology itself being used to streamline Palestinian, the genocide of Palestinians, apartheid, and military occupation. Of course, with the refinements in AI, the usage of programs like Lavender and the Gospel, to really automate the murders of Palestinians and the targeting of Palestinian infrastructure. Obviously, these things, have been expedited, and you have, via projects like Project Nimbus, you have companies like Google and Amazon really cashing in, and of course, the entire industry, as a whole, is really invested in the genocide, in the military occupation, in the apartheid. So it's really an issue that brings together, I guess it's kind of like a knot, a very, very tightly wound knot in a lot of ways. There's so many layers to it, but I really felt it was important to try to do kind of a full-length discussion and analysis of it, precisely because even though there's so many examples of it, I felt as though there needed to be more of kind of a critical attention to it and more of an attempt to kind of have a broad-based conversation about these things, in the same vein that we start to see other interventions into big tech that talk about how big tech fortifies, other systems and structures of oppression and discrimination, anti-Black racism, white supremacy, misogyny. I felt that, given the urgency with which these issues really relate to the Palestinian struggle and relate to the suppression and even genocide of Palestinians, it was important to do something on the same scale for this issue.
I would ask, when you see everything that's going on right now, it does seem like a lot of this is all coming to a head. And one thing that we pointed out regarding what happened in Minneapolis is that I don't think people truly understand that the majority of these ICE agents, they're basically trained by Israel. They're trained by the IDF. And because so many people have been hesitant to speak out against the genocide, it does appear now it's starting to come home to roost, and people who may have kept their mouth shut before, now they're not going to have a choice. Now they're really going to have to say something. And as much as I hate saying it, when you kill a white woman who is a mother of three in cold blood, execution style, they're going to, this is why they all got their marching orders to just sweep this all under the rug. It appears that the reason they're doing that is because they understand that this is a real crack in the armor and they're not going to be able to just sweep it under the rug. Can you kind of dive into that cross section of where we have what's happening in Gaza is effectively coming home to roost now here in the States?
Yeah, absolutely. I think on one level, there's something that's going to sound very simple, but I think it's really important to keep in mind. And, I'm not by any means the first person to say this, but just the sheer fact that you have had a live stream genocide playing out for so long, it in and of itself, this is already on some level, not to say that people are literally thinking of this as a laboratory in the way that I'm making it sound, but this was on some level an experiment to see, okay, how much brutality and violence, and complete just desecration of rights can we normalize, and can we force people to accept, and can we discipline, protests and speaking out around, and still see for the most part, right, no substantive material change in this policy that everybody can just recognize is blatantly wrong, right? I think there's something very psychically and psychologically, sociopolitically really important in that, right? In a sense, we've all been groomed through this live stream genocide, say, and, groomed about this really enforced powerlessness that we're seeing from the state. I think when you have gone through something like that and you've seen the relentless kind of suppression of any kind of dissent, and you've seen the response really be, we would rather immiserate any semblance of kind of a collective, sense of rights, and protection, rather than actually stop this. You are in very dangerous times. And so I think that that's a really important note to start with, just because I think it really spells how stark the situation is for us now. Now, in terms of the material aspects of what you're asking, yes, the officers being trained by the Israeli occupation forces, and a lot of these tactics and these technologies, it's also not one way, right? It's very cyclical, right? The Israeli settler colonial project in many ways, is fortified by and fortifies the US imperial project, right? It's very much, in terms of the state repression, a very fruitful collaboration. So it's no accident that we have these trainings. And it's also no accident that you're starting to see the very same type of elimination of any and all rights surrounding speech, surrounding protest, as regards the genocide, very naturally translate into protest and dissent surrounding ICE, right? Surrounding these cold-blooded assassinations, surrounding these harrowing kidnappings, these incarcerations and concentration camps. I really think it is important for us all to really see this as kind of multiple prongs in a broader project. So in a sense, I think it is right to say that this is coming home to roost, but on another level, if we understand, imperialism as a very cosmopolitan project, from the outset, it's no surprise, because in fact, what we normalize, happening abroad is always on some level going to come back, right? It's going to be a boomerang that is eventually going to come back to us. And I think now we're understanding the scale of it, to where there's not even, the sense of a need for a pretense of, due process or anything like that. So it's a question now of, what is next? How do we continue to resist? But, we do need to really keep in mind that what happened vis-a-vis the genocide, what continues to happen vis-a-vis the genocide in Gaza, is very deeply interconnected to what's happening right now.
Yeah, there's always this interconnection, and the link, it isn't completely just based on that it's digital, right? I mean, this is a very capital situation, because the digital is completely intertwined with the military. So it's at this point, I feel like when we talk about Silicon Valley and we talk about digital colonialism, it's just a manifestation of what we actually have. It's just that now we're able to see it so much clearer.
Yeah, absolutely. The dots have completely been connected. I mean, you see, basically all of these big wigs in the tech industry, where their ideology is, where their politics are, how invested they are, in this current administration. And of course, on some level, that's a little bit less surprising than I think when they were at least trying to go through the motions of pretending to be, somewhat liberal, centrist Democrats, really caring about things like diversity or human rights. Right now, the mask is completely off. But it's often a moment where we're realizing just how entrenched all of these projects are and how all of these interests are. And, on some level, too, I think that that's a very historically faithful, I guess, dynamic, right? What happens in the colonies, what happens, kind of on the seeming outposts of the empire is always what's going to come back and fortify, kind of the technological know-how, right, of the empire itself. So, we're just living the most contemporary moment of that, I think. But, I think to kind of come back to some of what we were discussing in terms of discourse, in terms of criminalization, the dots are also being connected in terms of how dissent is really criminalized. So, of course, many people who've been involved, I think, in the Palestine movement or the Palestine Solidarity movement, whatever term you want to use for it, we're often very familiar with, being kind of smeared as terrorists or terrorist supporters. And of course, those are the very same labels that are now being used for people who are protesting all kinds of things regarding, the domestic and foreign policy, whether it's these ICE kidnappings, and the complete kind of impunity, with which these armed kind of fascist thugs are basically terrorizing and kidnapping, with no sort of restitution for people who are impacted by it or anything else. We're seeing the lines being increasingly drawn, right? And all kind of housed under these umbrellas of, terrorism or extremism, radical gender ideology, whatever terminology they're using. It's not subtle, it's not sophisticated, and it's very clear that anything that is vaguely tied to not just a progressive or a liberatory or a leftist cause, but honestly, even something that is kind of a milquetoast liberal centrist notion of rights is increasingly being rebranded as extremism, right? And that's not an accident. And unfortunately, given how, the tech industry is, given the nature of Washington and given the nature of how global politics are playing out at large, we're seeing all of this convergence and all of this concentration. And so I think it really needs to give us pause, but it also should be a reminder that all of our struggles are very literally interconnected, right? In this moment, they're being connected for us. And so I don't, necessarily assume that organizers are ever really single cause, activists, just because, the famous quote goes, we don't live single issue lives. But now more than ever, I think it's really incumbent upon all of us to understand all of the interconnections in our struggles and to think about, okay, how do we actually continue to have a united front at a moment where the machinery of the state, the machinery of the industry is really just in lockstep, to suppressing us all.
I do often wonder, when the straw of the camel's back will be broken for the final time. I've been trying to explain to people that we both have, that this is a class war, nothing more. It's what it's always been. Religion is used as a weapon. It always has. And that's how they kind of get people to just fall in line. Putting the fear of God into people does work. It still works. It may not work like it used to, because technology has advanced us to the point where people have a much more open mind than that of just living in the same small town generation after generation. But we are still at a point now where the powers that be are not going to give up power. They are asking for a revolution. And the question is, are we going to have one? And if we are, how violent is it going to be? I'm not sure where it's going, but I think it's safe to say that whatever semblance of the supposed normalcy of a system that we supposedly had in place for many a generation, that's over. Like, it's dead. And I actually think it's quite insulting when I see people getting, like ramped up for the next election cycle. For what purpose? So that they can serve you the same bowl of shit all over again? Because nothing's going to change. The only thing that's changing is a revolution. That's it. That's where we are now. So how far away do you think we are from that moment?
That's it's an impossible question to answer. And I mean, I'm gonna go beyond that cop out, but I just want to quantify this a little bit, because just from my personal vantage point, so many things have happened a lot faster than I personally expected them to. And given that, the question of how around the corner is an actual revolution, revolution being a thing that I think we're often sort of primed to think of as being very far down the road. Now I feel like all bets are off in terms of what could happen, right? Even within the next few days, let alone the next few hours. And so all that's to say, I don't know exactly when it's gonna come, but we also should understand that we're already living in the midst of a very powerful counter-revolution, right? Which is the regime itself, the regimes that we're currently living under. There's increasingly less pretense of any kind of due process, of collective rights, and so we're actually being subjected to a very intensive counter-revolution and an undoing of any semblance of kind of restitution of basic rights that, to a certain extent, I think were always founded on a kind of hypocrisy. When we recall, the United States' own role, both as a settler colony as well as the largest imperialist empire in the moment, right? Of course, the rights, to a certain extent, are always kind of predicated upon a broader form of dispossession on some level. But I think now even that sort of veneer is being completely undone. So we are living through a very dangerous moment of transformation. And so the question is there actually going to be a liberationist kind of response, and even sort of an attempt to outmaneuver what is this counter-revolution that is being inflicted upon us currently, right, as we speak? I definitely think there is some kind of sizable and serious material change that is not only underway, but that is going to become even more stark very soon. And, being somebody who believes in the importance of remaining optimistic, even as the facts, are often very sobering, if only because I think that that's also important for resistance and for dissent. I think if we give in to despair completely, to a certain extent, we're also doing the work of the oppressors, right? So I think we do need to kind of remind ourselves that, we need to continue to see possibility. So on that level, I do very much hope that there can be something that is truly collectivist, truly liberationist, that meets the current counter-revolution that we are being subjected to. But I think it's really a combination of time as well as the significance of resistance efforts, that is really going to flesh out the picture for us.
Yeah, I agree. I've talked about this a lot. I think people, when they hear the term revolution, they think, oh, that's violent. Mm-hmm. Well, it inevitably ends up that way, but the revolution itself is not inherently violent. The revolution is actually happening right now. We're seeing it all over the world happening right now. We're in it. It's not necessarily going to look like what we perceive in this country, revolutionary war. Well, the war aspect comes at the end of that revolution. So that's sort of the direction we're going in. As far as the level of violence, as far as I'm concerned, and I've said it many times, the level of violence is determined by the oppressor. So the level of acceptable violence in our society is determined by the oppressor. And I'd say they're pretty friggin' violent. So unfortunately, that's where we are. And one thing I wanted to ask you about, like, while we're seeing this complete imposition of, digital apartheid or digital colonialism, if you want, first you can distinguish those two, but what are some of the things that Palestinian content creators, journalists, voices have been doing to circumnavigate what is going on with this level of suppression? Because again, this has been going on prior to, October 23.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I think, unfortunately, one of the kind of dangers that comes with the terrain of being, digitally active is that, for better and for worse, this over censoriousness of these platforms, or what I think of as this anti-Palestinian content moderation, has just become so normalized, right? The platform is basically instituted as policy at this point. And, individual users know that that's basically what they're going to be experiencing, right? And they know that they have very little recourse. Sometimes getting into some options people have, which are very limited, if you're going to go the route of trying to petition to have, an account reinstated or a post unblocked or uncensored, right? There are mechanisms for doing that. For example, via Meta, you can say that this post was wrongfully, taken down. And then it's a question of, are they going to, approve that or not, right? Are they going to agree with you or not? And, so either they don't and it stays down, or they do. But even when they do, people I've talked to have said that, the reach is already kind of throttled at that point. So even if it kind of comes back, the reach is throttled and you've sort of missed the moment, because one of the significant aspects of social media is, of course, how immediate it is. You can respond to things in the moment. You can provide a commentary of things as they're unfolding in real time. So suppression or censorship or deletion, stops your ability to do that. So even if you get something back, if you were talking about something that happened 5 days ago, by the time you get it back, at this point, the function of it has already basically been eclipsed, right? And then there's also, with the increasing aggressiveness of all forms of moderation, including this AI facilitated content moderation, a lot of terms are flagged. So what some content creators have started doing is using what is referred to as algo speak. So they'll kind of misspell words cleverly, or they'll use emojis, like the skull instead of, killed or died, right? Things like that. And to a certain extent, that bypasses some censorship. Then, of course, people have just also internalized the way that the algorithms work in terms of what they show to their audience. So I talked to content creators with very large audiences who would say, I noticed that I am so shadow banned. And of course, companies don't even admit they engage in shadow banning. It's just something users are able to kind of, connect the dots about. They say, I noticed that I'm shadow banned because I have such a huge audience and maybe only 100 or so people are seeing these posts about Palestine. I realized that then, I needed to kind of switch up my feed. So then I have a personal post, or maybe I post, an unrelated photo, things that make the algorithm more likely to show it to, my broader base of followers. And of course, but that's also an issue, because you need to start kind of catering your creativity and your time and your energy to kind of, extra work that, just to be able to actually do the main messaging that you really started the account to engage in the first place, which is talk about Palestinian rights, talk about the genocide, talk about military occupation, so on and so forth. So, there are some recourses that creators have, but it is not that much. And even, as we have really great organizations like Hamla, for example, the Palestinian Digital Rights Organization, and set of social, orgs that are doing really important work and really important documentations of all of these violations of digital rights. The issue we have is that these companies, given their private status, really are able to act with this impunity regarding what they censor and what they choose to allow to stay up. And, it's no accident that things that are tied to the liberation of an indigenous people are not on that list of speech that they think should be protected. In fact, it's the opposite. It's speech that should be throttled. It should be disappeared. It should be erased.
Well, we just went through that a couple of days ago, because I've been saying for the longest time that they do want to shut us down. They have to have some type of an angle to do it. They can't make it too obvious. But we got our second copyright strike, and it was from a clip from last year's Super Bowl. And of course, what was the clip? It was the clip of the backup dancer during the halftime show showing the Palestinian flag.
Mm-hmm.
So we were able to track down who got us the copyright strike. And we asked them, what is it going to take for you to consider removing the strike? 500 euros. Or we could talk about a partnership. So it's extortion on top of everything else. This is all about money. This is all about power. There is no justification behind it. If there was any indication that supporting the Palestinian cause was better for content creators, better for grifters, they would all jump on it like white on rice, like they do what just happened in Minneapolis. Again, it's all about the money. So everyone will be in line with what's going on until eventually it's just not feasible to do it anymore. And so I'm thinking, is it ultimately going to come to pass where enough people realize that Israel is the bane on our existence? They are a huge part. The whole construct of the Zionist state is a huge part of why our republic is collapsing under its own weight. You got Trump coming out saying, we totally need to have 1.5 trillion for our military budget now. And there are people that will go out and say, that's a great idea. Hey, we should have more money for the military. It's what it is. And as you like to say, Jen, pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. And if we're not in the hog stage, and I don't know what the hell stage we're in, I don't even think we're in the hog stage. I feel like we're in the elephant stage at this point. At what point does it just burst at the seams? Because I think everybody at this point is kind of looking around thinking, all right, what are we waiting for now? What are we waiting for at this point? Because they're daring us to do something.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I mean, I think we're at a point where, just the broader public perception, of the Israeli state, of the Israeli project is pretty abysmal for the most part. Of course, you're always going to have, the particular demographics that, remain supporters. You're going to have the political organizations and causes that, just by nature of their ideology will always be diehard supporters. But I think in terms of the broader public, I do believe we're at a point where there is a sea change in terms of people's perception of the Israeli state. And I do think we're also seeing increasing emphasis on how support for the Israeli project in many ways is ostensibly counter to our ultimate interests. Now, I want to be clear that I'm not saying that that's the case for the political elites, and that's not the case, for the project of empire, because Israel is actually a great gift for those things. But I do think if we're talking about kind of, ordinary individuals, right? I think people are aware that there is something very nonsensical about throwing all these resources, all this money into this colonial apartheid project, whose viciousness and violence is on full display and has been on full display for years, even with all of this censorship, right? But I think we're also at an interesting moment where the writing is on the wall, and the elites are aware that the writing is on the wall, but they also, have this kind of impunity to where they don't feel the need to really cater to the kind of popular interest at this point. And so it is, as you're saying, I think, what is going to happen next? They made it clear that they don't care. People are outraged in general, right? Outraged about many things, but there's starting to be more questioning of the support for this project that has long been, a pillar of U.S., foreign policy. So what's going to happen now? How many more letters, how many more protests, how many more messages do you really need, right? But I think we're at this moment where you have, to a certain extent, it seems to me kind of a breakdown in hegemony. There is less of an effort, let's say, to manufacture consent, right? That I think there has been since, for recent years that I can recall at least, right? And it seems as though people are really not buying it or not having it anymore for a large part. Again, aside from the particular political organizations or ideological projects for whom it is most beneficial to continue to support this. But I think we have a bigger shift in terms of people kind of rejecting this. And the question is, what's going to happen now? Because the elites have made it clear that they really don't care about that, right? And there's been countless, attempts, to kind of raise the stakes in dissent, and, really people from kind of all channels, have basically issued some kind of a decree or of dissent on some level, right? Whether they're, former state officials or whether they're, people who are not necessarily on our side, even in terms of having, a good, strong anti-imperialist politics. Even people who are products of the system itself have come out, have, sort of resigned over the years. And it's been very clear that this is going to continue to be maintained.
Well, because they're concerned, because they know that the walls are closing in on them too. And this is why you see the type of rhetoric that gets spewed all the time. And I feel that a good place to wind down the conversation is what just happened recently in Minneapolis. Again, Minneapolis, for some reason, is becoming the eye of the hurricane. But with that being said, the whole Somali fraud story and the whole boosting of Nick Shirley by Elon and a whole bunch of others, that kind of got sniffed out very, very quickly. A lot of people were thinking, okay, something's not adding up here. Something doesn't smell right. And while there are going to be those that just bow at the altar of MAGA or whatever you want to call it, because I do believe there is a clear-cut distinction between MAGA and America First in terms of the movement splits that are happening right now, at least in terms of conservative America. I would say that it is clear as day that the connection between what the Zionist state wants to do in Israel is the same in terms of what they're trying to accomplish here. And this is a clip, Jen, that you had sent me regarding how the Mossad was behind basically the entire thing. And people are now starting to pick up on this fact.
Israeli Mossad related to the recent corruption that was discovered in Minnesota. You're not going to believe it, but there actually is a substantial connection, and it runs through the Israeli Prime Minister office. I'll start from the end. Israel just established relationships with Somaliland, which is not Somalia. But the backstory to the whole Minnesota corruption story is that much of those funds, and again, I think the initial number that came out is about $9 billion. And again, this is crazy. Money of, let's say, 15 billion that they imagine were stolen or misdiverted from public funds. About 9 billion of those were sent back to support terrorism, or what they would call the Muslim Brotherhood actions, and this is tied into Qatar. And Israel, of course, was behind the scenes, and I know people love these conspiracies, in leaking some of the information that is responsible or related to the funding of terrorism using that exact money. So
I also want to just point out the absurdity of Somaliland. We need another Somalia that we can send the Palestinians to, or there's going to be a training ground, weapons testing ground. I just want to know who around the world thinks that this is normal discourse, because it doesn't seem normal to me at all. And the fact that the Mossad or Israeli intelligence is behind all of these clandestine operations that become more and more obvious on the surface, I do think we're heading a kind of revolutionary moment, because they're not able to fool people the way that they used to. As Lincoln always said, you can fool some of the people all the time. You can fool all the people some of the time. You can't fool all of the people all of the time. And I feel that we're at that point now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's even interesting to kind of compare this moment to the immediate sort of post 9/11 moment. I mean, I think a lot of the discourse that, to me, it seemed that had kind of more of a leverage in terms of, mobilizing the manufacture of consent, all of these things. I really think that at this point, people can see through all of this. And so you're really not able to kind of latch on to the same tropes, to use the same rhetoric in terms of criminalization, to just rely on the dehumanization of entire groups of people as an actual political argument, that resonates with people in the way that you were able to say in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, or prior to that. But again, I do think that given the fact that there is kind of this breakdown in the ability to manufacture consent, I think on the one hand, it's a good thing that people can see through it, but I think it should also kind of give us some pause, because the fact that that project is not working as effectively as it is anymore, the fact that hegemony is just that laid bare for all to see and is much more visible now than it ever was, means that, there's could also be other tools in the arsenal, to use, if you will, right, to kind of continue to ensure that these projects, and these operations go undisturbed. So, it is a question of thinking of, okay, what's next, and how do we continue to resist, and how do we continue to really reflect the interconnection of all of our struggles in terms of what we fight for, right? Collective freedom and liberation for all people, and a complete rejection of the impunity with which these agencies and which these armed forces and have continued to act, right, presently and historically.
Yeah. And it's absurd because, we've been it just makes us really see how often we've been propagandized and for how long. And the fact that now we're just able to see it so clearly and it's being called out. But I second guess everything. I don't believe any of it. But we had said that Israel recognizing Somaliland, Peter says it's like Narnia recognizing Atlantis.
It's all just made up stuff, and we'll finish it out. But this really does crystallize what I've been feeling, which is there's something really wrong here, and the average person is starting to feel the same way.
The fact that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has a phone call and recognizes Somaliland is tied into Qatar being a supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood, tied into the Somali funds that were stolen in Minnesota funding terrorism in the Middle East. That is a story that came out right now. It really blows my mind how global terrorism works, but it's such an amazing thing that it was uncovered, and I'm sure there's more news to come on this topic.
I feel like all filthy roads lead to Zio hell.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that for many of us who've been doing this work for years, it's felt like you've had to expend a good deal of, energy and time to kind of show how the premise, of what kind of defense people would make for Zionism or for the Israeli state project, how it actually, there isn't much substance kind of like subtending it, right? And I think that we're at a moment where it's very clear that, this is a lot more patent than it has ever been before. And we see that, what the rhetoric that Israel is often want to use is very contradictory to the actual reality of what it is doing, right? And part of it too, I think, is we're kind of living through this destabilization of this kind of mystique of, expertise that I think the kind of culture at large had often imputed to Israel, right? Like this kind of savvy tech bastion or, this counter-terrorist bastion, right? We're realizing that actually it's, really nothing more than brutality and conquest that has always really defined its major efforts. And it was so normalized precisely because, that violence was very conducive to the US's own imperialist interests, right? But now we're kind of seeing the fall of the kind of cultural cachet that I think the Israeli state has enjoyed in broader culture for so long. So, what do you do with that when you start to have, more and more receipts that kind of show that to be so, precisely also because we're in a cultural moment where people are starting to be skeptical and more people are starting to be skeptical. So more people are starting to piece everything together. So I think, we're going to continue to see this kind of decline. And I think we're going to continue to see more and more information come out about how really inimical the Zionist project is and always has been. And the question is, again, what is going to happen with all of those receipts, right? What are they going to translate to? What are they going to lead to? Part of the project that I have been doing is precisely to see what happens when, that the very ability to put that information to use is silenced, right? We're going to see a lot more silencing for sure. But the fact that I think a lot more people are primed and paying attention is important. And it means that there's going to be no shortage of attempts to continue to kind of bring the necessary information to the fore.
Can't thank you enough for coming on this evening. And these conversations are just one additional step towards the consensus that is going to hopefully drive a class war against this broken system, because that's the only way it ends. Can't end it at the ballot box. They've already shown you that elections are rigged, clear as day. And that includes elections that the GOP does, and that includes elections that the Democrats do. There are no there is no favoritism on one side or the other. There is empire, there is the ruling class, and there's everybody else. That's it. And no matter how much people may think that because they live in a comfortable neighborhood that they're protected, you're nuts. You're not protected. It's just a question of when it gets to you. And I guess I can blame Jen for having me watch the Hunger Games, because now a number of these things now seem to make sense.
I told you, it's a very good reference. It's a very good way to explain what's going on. I mean, it just is. And those of us who are fortunate enough to live in the capital, it's very easy to not know what's going on in District 12.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. And you have
Minneapolis is District 12, and now you're getting to see it in real time. So now you can't turn.
Minneapolis is not District 12. Minneapolis is still in the capital. District 12 is Palestine, Yemen, Haiti. That's District 12. District 12 are the places where we just write people off and it doesn't seem to bother us, so we just don't care. That's District 12.
Fair enough. But with that said, final thoughts before we go, Omar. Really appreciate your work, and also appreciate you coming on this evening and helping continue this conversation towards a revolutionary moment that we so desperately need.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure to be here. And I mean, I think final thoughts, I would just, encourage everyone to continue to seek out as many different forms of media as you can, especially independent media, and also I think it's really important to continue to challenge the hegemony of the big tech industry, including through social media. But one positive thing that's been developing regarding the question of censorship, I think, is that you're seeing people starting to create new platforms. So there's something called, Upscrolled, that a collective called Tech for Palestine. I believe it was actually a Palestinian Australian who at least co-founded it, but it was, an initiative through Tech for Palestine, which is a broader collective of really kind of anti-colonial, and anti-hegemonic tech initiatives. So I think we are going to see this question of, okay, are there actually viable alternatives? I think we're going to see some movement on that within the next few years. So that's something to look forward to. I think we need to continue to decry censorship and repression wherever we see it, but we should also maximize our abilities, as much as we can. So, part of, fighting and I think continuing to work toward liberation is also thinking about how do we not just resist the hegemonic uses of technology, but how can people really have their own kind of anti-colonial application of technology? And I think we're going to see a lot more movement on that in the months to come.
I hope so. I appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Check out Terms of Servitude, guys. Yeah, it's good. And also, and we didn't get into it, but a whole issue about doxing people that they're using to just go after so many people, because they do realize they're losing the narrative. That's what I mean. That's all. They're like playing whack-a-mole.
Yeah. And of course, you're seeing, again, we're seeing just a total kind of streamlining and a convergence of all of those things, because the same techniques are being used against people who are protesting ICE, who are protesting all of these things, right? And so there's such a natural affinity between Zionism and the broader kind of fascist far right, movement, right, that we're seeing launch this counter-revolution. So, let's also continue to be attuned to how the oppressors have been connecting the dots for us and can continue to do it to oppress us. But, we know what we're up against. We know it's not going to be easy, but we need to continue believing in and fighting for change.
Amen, brother.
Thank you, Omar.
Thanks, Omar.
Thank you all. Take care.
Nice to meet you.
Likewise.
Very educational, and that's why we do what we do.
It is why we do what we do. And I mean, it's scary. And this stuff has been going on long before October 7th, 23, the complete silencing of Palestinians and Palestinian voices. And this has been going on since 1948, really.
Yeah. Well, it's been going on a lot longer than that, but in terms of...
Yeah, and his book really focuses on the tech aspect of it, which is what we're dealing with now. And the fact that it's all owned by the same handful of people that are all Zios.
Well, I mean, listen, I've been doxxed. This is the risk you take with a platform like we have. And I was just thinking, with our counterparts over at Due Dissonance, they have a similar size and scope in terms of a channel, and they're getting 2,000-3,000 live viewers at a time, and we're stuck right now at 250, 275. It's obvious that the message that we're putting out there is really bothering the shit out of people that have sway. They do not want our message getting out there, and they're going to do everything to deter us from continuing doing what we're doing. We're not going to stop. In fact, we're going to continue to thumb our eye at this whole fucking system until they do take us down, proving our point once and for all that we are right. And eventually, that'll be it. Hey, if we're boring, that's great, but clearly it's not enough to bore you to leave. So thank you for letting us know. We really appreciate it. And I bring this up because there's no question that there are interconnected pieces to why we, in this case, invaded Venezuela and how it's connected to the Zionist state. And that leads us to Paul Singer. Paul Singer is the founder, president, co-CEO, and co-CIO of Elliott Investment Management, launched in 1977 with a small loan of $1 million. You know what $1 million is today compared to 1977? Probably 4 or 5 million would be my guess. So a nice little loan.
I think more than that. I think more than that, but okay.
Nice little something to get you started.
Yeah.
Total assets under management for the Elliott funds have grown to approximately $72.7 billion as of December 31st of 24. Elliott is a Florida, of course he is, based trading firm with affiliated offices elsewhere. The Wall Street Journal has recognized Elliott for its early forecasting of the systemic economic crisis of 08. The New York Times has written that all the hedge fund managers on Wall Street, Elliott is one of the most revered. In his philanthropic activities, Mr. Singer has played a leading role in supporting research and scholars in the areas of free market economics.
Oh, how generous of him.
Seriously.
He's a real giver.
Rule of law and transparency, healthcare, delivery, innovation. What, you mean like United Health? By the way, in case you guys haven't noticed, we're getting a lot of United Health ads on our channel as well. U.S. national security and the future of Israel. Mr. Singer is also active in supporting the LGBT equality efforts.
How nice of him.
According to the
That's some pink washing right here. Let's do it.
Hey, let's buff his balls while we're at it. According to the New York Times, he was instrumental in the successful campaign to legalize same-sex marriage in New York. Of course he was. He's probably in the closet. Mr. Singer is co-founder of Startup Nation Central, an organization committed to solving global problems through deepening ties between Israel's startup ecosystem and the global innovation economy. Mr. Singer is also the chair of the Manhattan Institute for Policy Research. Yeah, we know how that goes. So this guy is apparently, he stands to benefit in a substantial way when it comes to the Zion, not because he supports the Zionist state, but because he fully supports the invasion of Venezuela and taking over the oil fields.
Yes.
He gave $5 million alone to Trump in 2024. He gave $37 million to the GOP in 2024. It sounds like he's getting a good ROI, if you ask me.
Oh yeah. I mean, is this done? Like, is the article done?
Colin, I know. Colin, where is the other thing that I sent you regarding Singer? AIPAC donor on cusp of reaping billions from U.S. abduction of Maduro.
Here it is.
Paul Singer, a prominent Republican donor, has made a cut-rate offer to buy a string of Venezuelan-owned refineries in the U.S. And of course he looks like that, because why wouldn't he? Scroll up, please. They all fucking look like this with their needle dick. They're all the same, all of them. They all fucking look like this. If you're in a room of wealthy investors or entrepreneurs or bigwigs without the hair, just know that they pretty much all look this way. And I'm sure he's only about 5'5", 5'6". But he's got a lot of money. He makes up for his shortcomings. He looks exactly like you would expect a Zio oligarch to look like. So let's scroll down. A major donor to the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, could reap billions of dollars from a fire sale of Venezuela's oil assets following the U.S. abduction of President Nicolas Maduro on Saturday. Maduro's removal and a pilot government. What does that mean?
And a what?
Where
do you see it?
P-L-I-A-N-T.
Pliant. Maduro's removal and a pliant government. So pliant means easily manipulable.
Okay. In Caracas could allow Singer to finalize a deal that would see his investment firm, Elliott Investment Management, gain control of a network of U.S.-based oil refineries and at a steeply discounted price. What you mean, like for 2 cents on the dollar, like they always do? When we talk about the rich getting richer, if this doesn't make you sick, I don't know what will. Maybe some people like being subservient cucks to the wealthy and powerful. I don't know, but I certainly won't be. How this is an acceptable discourse. And I was pretty close. Thank you, Algerian.
Okay.
5.34 million today.
Okay.
You don't have to type it 50 times, but I appreciate it. Singer's firm bid $6 billion for refineries in Texas, Louisiana, and Illinois, which some analysts say could be worth $12 billion. If Trump follows through on his pledge to revive Venezuela's oil industry, the country's heavy crude could start flowing back to the U.S. in large numbers. Elliott Investment Management is no stranger to the world of emerging market debt. It made billions of dollars in the aftermath of Argentina's debt crisis in the 2000s. Well, you can imagine how much he's got Milei under his thumb. But it also has an inside track to the Trump White House. Singer, 81, of course, is a major donor to AIPAC and the Republican Party. Of course he is. Singer has emerged as one of the top donors supporting an effort to oust Congressman Thomas Massie from office. So there you go. You want to know who's spending a lot of money to get the one honest operator in the GOP off of Capitol Hill? There he is. The Kentucky Republican has emerged as a sharp critic of U.S. support for Israel and foreign intervention. According to Grok, Paul Singer, globalist Republican megadonor, who's already spent $1 million in the primary against Thomas Massie, stands to make billions of dollars on his distressed Citgo investment now that this administration has taken over Venezuela. You mean invaded and conquered, imperialized Venezuela.
We'll see.
In November, a U.S. judge backed Elliott's bid to buy Citgo, but the sale has not been finalized. Citgo is owned by Venezuela's state-run company, PDVSA. Maduro's government denounced the bid as fraudulent, of course, and a U.S. government-appointed board tapped to oversee Venezuela's oil assets abroad also rejected it. The U.S. Treasury Department still needs to approve the deal. PDVSA was a major player in the global energy industry decades ago, but suffered from underinvestment and mismanagement after Hugo Chavez was elected in 1998 and moved to nationalize the oil industry. Over the last decade, Venezuela's oil sector was hollowed out by crushing U.S. sanctions. Well, there you go. You don't want to trade with us? We'll just sanction your country.
Yeah.
Again, another noticing, as we call it. You are forced to do business with the United States under threat of violence and coercion, not for free will. You have assets. We want them. You will either give it to us on our terms or we'll take them. Those are your choices. The proceeds from Citgo's sale would go to some holders of PDVSA's debt. Venezuela is estimated to have around $150 billion in debt, including debt belonging to PDVSA. Caracas defaulted on its debt in 2017, and its bond prices collapsed in 2019, When the U.S. sanctioned PDVSA's oil sales, roughly 20% of that debt is owned by China and Russia, which have supported Maduro's government. If Citgo's sale is sealed, it would underscore how U.S. investors, particularly hedge funds that purchase cheap Venezuelan debt, are making gains from the geopolitical earthquake in South America. How much more do we have?
Right there.
That's it. The death count from the U.S. attack on Venezuela has risen to over 80, including civilians and members of security forces, including 32 Cuban members of Maduro's security team, according to the AP. U.S. Special Forces abducted Venezuela's president from the capital, Caracas, early on Saturday, and American fighter jets bombed key military installations and bases across the country. Venezuela's acting president, Delcy Rodriguez, said the U.S. abduction of Maduro has Zionist undertones. Yeah. Rodriguez, who served as Maduro's vice president, has been appointed by the U.S. Supreme Court to lead the country on an interim basis.
My understanding from what I've seen and what I've been watching on channels that I watch is we are not in charge of anything there. She's running the country, and I don't know how much or how well she's going to play ball with us. I don't know that. But no, we're not and running things. And this woman, who is now the acting president, is someone who comes from a pretty long history of the opposition. I mean, our opposition, not the opposition of Venezuela. Like from the Chavista revolution, her father was involved in politics there. So this is someone who has been resisting oppression in general. So I don't know that she's necessarily going to be our tool to the way that people think she is. We'll see. I don't know how this is going to play out.
I just don't see the Venezuelan people rolling over and playing dead for Zio billionaires like Paul Singer. And he needs to get his comeuppance. And hopefully he will. Now, when it comes to local, or even, I wouldn't even call them local, but when it comes to our home turf, when it comes to federal elections that will have an impact. Now, Pelosi, as we know, is giving up her seat in San Francisco, probably because she doesn't have a lot of time. And with that being said, there was a town hall that the three primary candidates were being hosted for the other night, and this question came up.
Oh, that's that guy that we saw at the college in San Francisco. This is the guy who was sitting there being protected by his handler while somebody was questioning him about his stance on Gaza. So that's fine. He looked about as charismatic then as he does now.
He's also 6'7", apparently, so he's a giant of a man.
Well, he looks like a small little wiener.
Well, he probably has a small little wiener and acts like a small little wiener on top of that. And here he is twiddling his thumbs about is Israel committing a genocide. And
he's on the payroll, by the way.
Oh, absolutely he is. So the question is, how does he think he's going to get elected to Congress? I do think that this is going to be a good test. Scott Wiener is a good test to see what is going to happen in this, what will be a very expensive and highly contested congressional race. It's obviously heavily Democratic. So whoever ends up winning the primary is going to be the congressperson. Even though in California, you do have the two, you have the jungle primary. But there is no question that this man is a prime example of what a Zionist shitlib looks like in human form. Zio Wiener. Yeah. Yeah, but this is a shitlib Zionist in human form. That's what this is.
That clip was from our first Canada debate last night, and it tells you everything you need to know about this race. Because when you can't call out a genocide when the whole world sees one, how can we trust you in DC? The vast majority of people in this country want to stop American taxpayer dollars from funding a genocide in Gaza. We have to replace Republicans and Democrats who aren't with the people, and that's what I'm going to do.
Now, whether is it
Hi, Cedar Child from Beirut.
Yeah.
Stay safe.
Yes, please. And that is exactly why the great noticing continues, because that's what's happening here. Now, is Saikat the real deal? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, he's a wealthy entrepreneur. He wants to, I mean, again, he's like Roe in the sense that, is he probably, representative of the people that live in the district that he seeks to represent? Yeah, probably. And at least we know that that's somebody who is not going to get on his hands and knees for the state of Israel. We all know that Scott Wiener will. So are there enough Zio scumbags that live in that district that are going to vote for him in the primary? Who knows? But it's going to be a good test case for sure. And the last story we're going to cover this evening is one that I was able to come across from years ago. Now, you guys remember at one time, Vice was actually a pretty viable independent media channel, but, Shane Smith and amongst other people ran it into the ground. But for a time, they were doing some important stuff. Now, while everybody seems to have this fallback position about Israel and the Jews,
lords, right? He would be cleaning the feet of like the people that are unhoused and the people that are sick. That's the whole point. So, these people are they're false prophets, they're idol worshipers. And I agree with, and we're going to be having Rabbi Shapiro back on, but that's one of the things that he says about the Zionist Jews. They're idol worshipers. And that's essentially the same thing. So,
Well, they worship the golden calf. They worship at the altar of money and power, which is the complete opposite of everything that Christ's teachings is about. That's why it was really ballsy to put that, come to Christ advertisement in the Super Bowl last year. People were offended by it.
White supremacy is deeply embedded into Zionism.
What happened?
I don't know. Who put that?
I didn't do anything. I didn't mean to do anything. Don't get so annoyed. I didn't mean to do anything. I must have accidentally did something.
While we're at it, I would love to get Alon Mizrahi on the channel, but this is also another example, the brainwashing of Christian Zionism. Well, Jewish Zionism has erased Palestinian and Middle Eastern Islamic heritage. That's what they do. And this is what Alan had to say about that.
I think it's
Jewish
Elon.
father and Moroccan Jewish mother.
The humiliation Arab Jews experienced in Zionism is something they never experienced in the Arab countries. They never experienced white supremacy in Morocco or Iraq or Yemen. They only experience it here.
45% of Jews in Israel originate from the mostly Arabic-speaking countries in North Africa and the Middle East. Today they're called Mizrahi. Many left those countries after a rise in hostility, largely sparked by Zionism and Israel's creation, but in Israel they faced hostility too. Zionism's early leaders condemned them for being too Arab, calling
Condemn them for being too Arab. You mean being too brown?
We've talked about this many times. When people say, oh, the Arab nations kicked out the Jews. No, they didn't. That's not what happened. The Zionists, in conjunction with heads of state and people that we have, royal monarchies that we've put in positions of power in those Arab states, were backing up the Zionist project and contributing so that they would have enough of a head count to be the majority in Ziohel. That's the whole point. And the whole term Mizrahi Jew was created by the Zios in Israel, by the Ashkenazi Jews, to basically denote the difference between white Jews and non-white Jews. So, yeah.
And when you have knockoff Heinrich Himmler and knockoff Albert Einstein, and make no mistake, David Ben-Gurion is definitely somebody who, in my opinion, had a hand in JFK's assassination. We're still trying to set up a little panel discussion with Ken McCarthy and Wally Rashid regarding this topic. But these are the men who are saying that too Arab, not worthy enough. Of course, this is a form of white supremacy. Because as I've always say, I believe that this is something that is very overstated in many respects. I think people jump to too many conclusions when it comes to things like racism and bigotry. But when it's clear as day, you have to call it out. And in this case, the whole ideology of Zionism is that it's supremacy, period.
Them uneducated masses and savage.
They treated brown Jews and Jews from Muslim origins, from Arab countries, as inferior. Arab Jews needed to unlearn their Arabic accent.
Yep. And again, they did the same thing to the Palestinian Jews. So not just the Jews that came from places like Iraq or Syria or Jordan or wherever they were, bringing them in to make their numbers. They discriminated against all of those Jews. All of them. Palestinian Jews had to renounce if they wanted to stay in what's called Israel in the 48, so inside Israel proper, and be Israeli citizens. Those Jews, those Palestinian Jews, had to stop speaking their language and start speaking Hebrew. They were no longer allowed to speak Arabic. So, they weren't allowed to be both Palestinian and Jewish, even though they were Palestinian Jews. They weren't allowed to be that. So if you had Palestinian Jews, they still wouldn't be allowed to have a Palestinian flag. So this is never about helping Jews and protecting Jews.
Never. And that's why we cover these stories. And we are appreciative for those of you that have stuck it out with us tonight. And we'll have to get a little better with our subject lines for our audience on Saturday. I'll work on that. But we certainly hope you've enjoyed this conversation. And if you have, one more time, please consider going over to patreon.com/revolutionary change for as little as $5 a month. You can become a supporter of our small but mighty and suppressed channel. And I think I had mentioned earlier why things went down the way that they did. We're just going to continue to have to fight through the bullshit. That's all we can do, guys. And we're very appreciative for each and every one of you that are here this evening. Our trusty mod with the 2 Canadian A, best chat, bringing people together from all walks. I agree. And of course, duly noted with the $5, will Israel hijacked by Zionists be sending Palestinians to Somaliland by train? Anything's possible with the way they conduct business. Nothing would surprise me in the least. Hamburger with the 5 Revolutionary Change memberships gift. Thank you very, very much. We really appreciate it, my friend. Rabbi has whatever.
It's all one word, so we can't tell. Rabbi. We're going to say Rabbi.
Rabbi Hasadui. Thank you very much for the $20 the 20 Australian dollar super sticker. Very much appreciated, my friend. Thank you so much.
So it's tomorrow there. He's watching us in the future.
He's watching us in the future for sure. He crossed the Rubicon. John Doe Humdrum with the $5. Israeli tourist is suspected of starting an ongoing fire in a national park in Patagonia. Is that how you say it?
Patagonia.
Millet made cuts to forest management, of course. But remember, Israelis are entitled to do whatever they want. Haven't you learned that already? But we will I'll look to cover that on Saturday, sure. If you have any information you want to send, absolutely, we would cover it. And duly noted with the $5 again, they used to raise money to send Jews to occupy Palestine on infomercials on Channel 13. So basically PBS. So on PBS, they would do this. They had to change tactics since the era of cable TV. So again, it's been going on for a very long time. No surprise. Are you surprised?
No. Maeve wants to know, Jen, do you think it's time for us to get armed? I've been actually thinking about this a lot lately, and I'm gonna make a few recommendations based on what I see. To
Very
people,
careful what you say on the channel.
oh yeah, no, not like that. That's not within my recommendations. But for people who are watching the decline of empire, and I do believe that we are going to see the end of the dollar as the global currency within the next 10 years. And I do think that is going to hit very, very hard, harder than most people are thinking. And the reason that anybody would get armed is when the supply chain gets to where it's going to get and gas prices go where they're going to go and countries don't want to trade with us, people are going to start having to take matters into their own hands or feel like they do to be able to survive. So my recommendations for people, if you really want a plan as to how to deal with the impending end of American empire, my first option for people who can do so is to leave and go to a country that isn't going to be seeing the end of their dollar in the next 10 years.
I'm thinking about applying for my citizenship in Ireland.
Whatever floats your boat. I mean, the truth is any empire adjacent countries are also going to be hit, but not to the extent that I believe this country is going to be hit. So for people who have the ability to leave this country, and not in a, oh my God, it's Armageddon way, but in a, oh, you might struggle less with, exactly.
That's coming. Like for those of you who are,
yeah.
If you, the only two things that again, hard assets, that's it. That's all it should ever be.
So I would say my first choice would be for people who can leave to leave. Make it easier for yourself and not go through the decline of empire in the belly of the beast. And for someone saying weapons solve what? I'm not saying weapons solve anything. I'm just saying that is where that idea comes from, where people are going to need to protect their land, protect their stuff, because not everybody is going to have access to stuff anymore. My second choice for people who do not have the ability to leave the country, this would be my second pick. And this is essentially what I'm going to be doing, is I suggest creating an environment with small sustainable communities. People who can, if you are capable of moving somewhere and creating a homestead and not like it's Armageddon, but just when the prices of things are going to get astronomical, we're going to need to be in smaller sustainable communities. We need to have co-ops among local homesteaders and artisans, because people who are just going to be completely counting on external resources for food and survival, it's going to get really hard. So my first choice is for people who can leave this country. I would. And if you can't, you should definitely consider becoming more self-sustainable and living in a way that will require less commuting, because it is going to get really pricey to exist in this country, and especially for people in suburbs that drive everywhere.
A big shout out to Warrior Flight for the 1999 contribution. It is very sweet of you to contribute at that number. And for anybody who's contributed this evening, we are very appreciative. I would also say that at the end of the day, I'm not going to leave. I know I can't. This is my home. This is where I'm from. And I love my country. I love what the United States is supposed to represent. I absolutely despise and detest each and every one of those scumbag pieces of garbage that are running it with an iron fist and with complete reckless abandonment, who have no consideration whatsoever for what this country is supposed to represent or what it means. Just like we see the pastors who speak blasphemy against their supposed Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Well, if that's the case, then it is incumbent upon us to recognize what we need to do in order to fix this problem. And I do believe that a revolution is inevitable. Now,
Thank you, Warrior Flight. Warrior of Light, 801.
Yeah, and I guess you just forgot that I pointed that out like 2 minutes ago.
No, I was just thanking her.
Oh, okay. And I think that in the end, we are faced with a lot of tough decisions going forward. That's good, hamburger. No wonder you like hamburger. So you got to stick to cow meat. It is what it is.
He doesn't want to eat his chicken friends.
Yeah, that's some. There were some good Chick-fil-A commercials regarding that, but nevertheless, I agree with you. I think that eventually people are just going to get they're going to get squeezed so tight that they're not going to have a choice. And when resources become a big problem, that's where we're headed. And
that's when things can become violent. And again, I am not armed. I am not saying I am violent. I am not encouraging people to be violent. But that seems to be the nature of humanity when things get scarce.
Yes. And as Libertarian Social Democrat points out for the 199, we need smaller, affordable condos and live simple. Yes. I mean, again, living simple is easier said than done, but the mask has been removed. You can't look around at what's going on right now and think that there's anything normal about this. There isn't. This is the end of empire. People just don't realize it. When you have the president of the United States coming out and saying, we need 1.5 trillion for the military, people have probably lost their mind thinking we could have ever gotten to $1 trillion in an annual military budget. Now he wants to add an additional 50% to it. Do you realize how insane that is? Do you realize how insane that amount of money is? And we're also dealing with a country where the rich do not want to pay any taxes. And they've figured out every which way to break the system so they don't have to. So the burden falls on us, on all of us. We're the ones who are screwed. It pays to be rich. It pays to be poor. And anyone who's in between is fucked. That's basically what this has become. Whoever has none must sell his cloak and buy a sword.
Raised by Wolves. I'm glad you mentioned that, because we will be discussing that very, very verse when we talk with John Fugelsang, because he has some interesting commentary about that. And his book does a deep dive into that verse. And it is by no means any sort of indication that Jesus was supporting violence. So we'll get into that. But yes, I just think it's funny that you brought that up. Yes.
And the violence will get worse. The attacks by ICE are going to get worse. Do not think you can hide from this. You can't, unless you want to be cucks to corporate power. Some people do. Some people are cowards and they're just willing to do it. And if they could get paid in the process, hey, even better. But that's
guys, I'm not saying any country is inherently better. And I'm not saying people should leave if if you can't, then you can't. But what I'm saying is that it is going to be our dollar, our currency, that will no longer be the global currency. So that means that it will have the greatest impact on us.
Correct.
I'm not saying any other country is going to be a salvation, but I do think that when you move someplace that isn't used to being the world hegemon, when we're no longer the world hegemon, you're not going to have the same impact that we will have here.
This is why we have to continue doing what we're doing, even at the risk of our channel getting shut down. So with that said, smash that like button, share, subscribe, do all those things that we ask you to do. We love you all. We appreciate you all. I will see you Saturday.
And guys, free Palestine, because that's what he wants me to say, but free Palestine.
Free Palestine. Good night, guys.